Okay, let's unpack this. Um, Many of us have a certain image of Brazil, right? Vibrant, full of life, maybe, carnival, natural wonder. But today we're diving into some, well, truly thought-provoking material. It's going to challenge that perspective, I think, and maybe reveal a much starker reality presented in our source. Our compass for this deep dive is this powerful essay. It's titled Brazil, Destroyer of People, Nature, and Climate by Richard Preschel. So our mission here is to really explore the specific, pretty unflinching claims made in this piece. It paints a very, very challenging picture of Brazil's human rights record and its environmental impact. You're definitely going to walk away with some potent insights and perhaps some surprising facts, that shine a light on this particular perspective from the essay. Let's start with human rights and social issues. The essay frames this as a pervasive history of impunity. It opens by highlighting Brazil's population dynamics. It states it's the non-African country with the largest black population globally. Yet the author notes, during the World Cup, almost none were visible in the stadium stands. This is despite many Afro-Brazilians being, players on the field. The essay, it really doesn't pull punches here. It describes this as Brazil's de facto apartheid, persisting, it says, with total impunity. When you read a claim like de facto apartheid and then immediately followed by total impunity, what does that suggest? What are the implications there, according to the source?
Yeah, that's a crucial observation from the source material. The consistent assertion of total impunity. It isn't just about, say, a lack of arrests or specific legal actions. It speaks to something deeper, like a systemic failure, a failure of governance, maybe, and social accountability. It sort of suggests a situation where really serious actions, things that you'd expect to have severe repercussions elsewhere, are just allowed to continue unchecked, which of course perpetuates a cycle of harm because there are apparently no meaningful consequences for those involved. That's the core idea of impunity here.
Right, no consequences. And the essay suggests the situation for Brazil's indigenous peoples is even more dire, a devastating consequence of this same impunity, it argues. We learn from the source that their communities face, and this is a direct quote, ongoing extermination efforts aimed at seizing their lands. And again, carried out with total impunity and scant media attention. Yeah. This isn't just presented as a broad claim either. The essay gives a specific, quite tragic example, the Guarani-speaking peoples near São Paulo. They've apparently been dispossessed of their ancestral lands and confined to isolated ghettos, where the source says living conditions are worse than in the most neglected favelas.
Worse than the favelas. And if we connect this to the kind of the bigger picture the essay is drawing, it argues for a continuous historical pattern, of human rights violations. It's not just presented as a contemporary issue, but rather the author states quite forcefully that genocide has been an uninterrupted practice since the arrival of the Portuguese, continuing to this day without accountability or awareness from the broader population. So it paints this picture of something foundational, deeply ingrained in the nation's history, according to this perspective.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting and quite provocative, actually. The essay uses these historical details to underscore its claims with a very, very strong statement. It says, if there is one country that lacks the moral ground to criticize others on human rights, it is Brazil. That's quite a statement. And it backs this up with some surprising historical points, things maybe not widely known. For instance, the author notes Brazil harbored the largest number of Nazi criminals, who, astonishingly, according to the source, lived there with remarkable ease. It's also where the acclaimed writer Stefan Zweig tragically took his own life shortly after arriving, and where Josef Mengele, the infamous Nazi doctor, peacefully passed away in his old age. The essay uses these specific examples. It really challenges common perceptions, doesn't it, about Brazil's role in history?
Absolutely it does. The essay seems to leverage these historical examples very deliberately. It uses them to illustrate this pervasive narrative. It's building a society where accountability for severe human rights abuses has historically been, absent. It reinforces that core argument about impunity. These aren't just presented as isolated facts, but as threads, weaving into its larger critique of Brazil's historical and ongoing ethical landscape, as the author sees it.
Okay, so we've touched on the human toll described in the essay, but it argues that Brazil's impact extends far beyond its people. It reaches, apparently, into the very heart of the planet's ecosystems. Let's shift our focus now to the environmental and climate devastation the essay discusses, particularly concerning the Amazon rainforest. The source starts by challenging a belief many of us probably hold. The idea that the Amazon rainforest is the lungs of our planet. The essay flat out asserts this is an urban legend.
Right, an urban legend. And this raises an important question then. If it wasn't the lungs, what was its role, according to the essay, and what changed? Well, the essay's reasoning is this. In the tropics, day and night are roughly equal length. And because of this, the ecosystem historically maintained a zero carbon footprint. Think of it like a perfectly balanced seesaw. It converted CO2 into oxygen during the day, photosynthesis, right? But then at night, through respiration, it basically reabsorbed that oxygen, converting it back into CO2 at an equal rate. So it was in this constant state of equilibrium, essentially carbon neutral.
Okay, neutral. But the critical change, the essay claims, is that extensive deforestation has disrupted this delicate balance.
Yeah.
Massively disrupted it. And as a result, the Amazon rainforest has, apparently quite recently, transitioned into a net contributor of CO2 to the atmosphere due to the massive deforestation by Brazil. So far from being neutral or helpful, it's now actively adding CO2. That's the argument.
Yeah, that's a major claim. And the source also clarifies another common misconception. It states that most of the oxygen we breathe originates from the ocean's phytoplankton. These are, microscopic marine organisms. They release O2 as a byproduct of their photosynthesis. And crucially, the essay points out, they do not reabsorb it from the atmosphere like terrestrial vegetation does.
Wow.
So that kind of shifts our whole understanding of where most of our breathable air actually comes from, according to this source.
Right. So if the primary loss isn't necessarily about oxygen production, the essay emphasizes that the real profound loss of the Amazon is that it's a unique biotope. Essentially, a specific ecological area with its own distinct community of life. And it harbors a, quote, quickly diminishing variety of ethnicities, plants, and animals. It's presented as this irreplaceable hub of biodiversity that's just vanishing. And the scale of this loss, according to the data cited in the essay, is just staggering. Deforestation rates apparently remain alarmingly high, gives a figure, an area of 11,568 kilometers lost in 2022 alone,
Right.
which is roughly equivalent to the size of Jamaica every single year. And to put it into perspective, the World Wildlife Fund, the WWF estimate cited in the essay, suggests that by 2050, only 50% of the original forest will remain. Half gone?
Half gone by 2050. And this all leads to the essay's really grave conclusion. It posits that Brazil is, quote, currently engaged in the largest ethnocide and ecocide in history, all while operating with total impunity and no accountability. It's a stark accusation, isn't it? Tying together the human devastation and the environmental destruction under that same consistent theme, a lack of consequence.
It really is. And here's a connection the essay makes that might surprise you, especially if you're a tofu enthusiast. It notes that a significant portion of tofu is made from soybeans sourced from deforested regions of the Amazon rainforest. It really makes you pause and consider the sort of hidden supply chains behind everyday things.
Yeah, that soybean connection is presented as critical because the source explains this devastating agricultural cycle. Apparently, after just 2 or 3 harvests of soybeans, the soil becomes depleted, it's vulnerable to erosion, and this process results in, quote, barren landscapes that are stripped of their vitality, leaving behind a lifeless desert. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, and the broader environmental impact of our consumption choices? Well, according to this essay, it paints a picture of how seemingly benign choices, like, buying a common food product, can inadvertently fuel these massive global crises, far removed from our direct line of sight. It's quite sobering.
So, yeah, we've explored the 2 main narratives from this powerful source as presented by the author: the deep-seated human rights issues and the significant environmental devastation in Brazil. And both, as the essay consistently argues, are operating with this chilling, pervasive impunity.
Absolutely. This deep dive, based purely on the source we examined today, Richard Preschel's essay, it paints an incredibly stark picture, a challenging one. It really compels you, I think, to consider how these historical patterns of behavior, the ones the essay describes, can ripple through time, how they impact not just human populations, but entire ecosystems. It makes you think about the complex web of global issues, doesn't it? And how interconnected our world truly is, often in ways we might not immediately perceive.
A lot to consider there, for sure. And definitely a different perspective than maybe many of us hold about Brazil. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this exploration has given you a concise yet powerful understanding of the specific issues and arguments raised in this particular source. And perhaps it's even sparked a desire to learn more, maybe dig deeper into the complexities of global supply chains, human rights issues, and environmental challenges worldwide.